I'm Dr. Edward Jenny, owner and clinical director of Edward Jenny and Associates. In our assessments and in our therapy work, we put a lot of emphasis on what is called attachment theory. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about what attachment is and how it affects people's relationships and their therapy. Put simply, attachment is about survival. It's a biological system that is designed by evolution to ensure the survival of our children. So attachment is built into our relationships and into who we are and how we view relationships as adults as well as children. Humans are born extremely vulnerable. They require significant care from attachment figures in order to survive, much like other species. This extended dependence period gives time for a lot of relational development, and that's what attachment is really all about. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, wrote that life is best organized as a series of daring ventures from a secure base. The secure base that he's talking about here is the relationship to the caregiver. So if you imagine an infant, they are entirely dependent upon the caregiver for all of their basic needs, for their very survival. And as they grow, they learn to venture into the world and to explore the environment around them. But they always have the ability to return to that secure base, that relationship with their caregiver. Bowlby also recognized that this basic biological infrastructure was central to our wiring. We are wired as humans for relationships, and this attachment system is one of the major reasons why that's true. So attachment, as I said, is a biological system. It's designed to ensure survival of these very dependent offspring. And in a simple way of looking at it, it is all about regulating distance, physical distance between the child and the attachment figure or the caregiver. So there are two different systems that are balanced with each other. One is the exploratory system. So if you picture a toddler with their mother, they will venture out into the world and they'll explore things, but if something startles them, what do? They return to that caregiver. Maybe they hug the caregiver or grab their leg or they look for soothing. And the caregiver, if they're paying attention and if they're available, provide just the right amount of soothing so that that child can regulate their feelings and can go back to exploring. That is the secure base that we're talking about. So when the attachment system is activated, they get scared, they get nervous, they get hungry, they need something. The child signals to the attachment figure that they need something, and the attachment figure responds in an appropriate and timely way. That is secure attachment. So what do we mean when we talk about secure attachment? This is one of the classifications that we use to determine someone's attachment status. So about 60% of the population fall into this secure attachment classification. And we'll talk about what that means at the internal or representational level in a moment. But in general, people who are securely attached have had the experience of an attachment figure or caregiver who has been reasonably responsive over long periods of time. So when a signal was given, the attachment figure is available and comes to give them what they need. They learn to soothe, they learn to manage their emotions, they tend not to get as flooded, they can be flexible in relationships, and they have a positive sense of who they are. So if people are not in that secure classification, they can be in one of two organized insecure classifications. And the first is the dismissing adult or the avoidant infant. They use different language for infants versus adults. But these are folks who have learned to cope with attachment figures who are not available consistently by diminishing their reliance on the attachment system. They turn the volume down. They cool down their attachment needs and learn to be very independent and not to emphasize their attachment distress or needs. The other approach is to turn the volume up, and these are the preoccupied adults or the ambivalent children. So if the attachment figure is inconsistently available, they learn that they have to make a lot of noise and a lot of signaling to get the attention of that attachment figure. They're always watching for when the attachment figure is available and try to take advantage of it when they are. If people are not secure and they're not in one of the organized insecure classifications, we classify them as disorganized or unresolved. And what that means is that they are not secure in their attachment classification, but they don't have a consistent way of managing that stress. So sometimes they use the dismissing defenses, and other times they use the preoccupied defenses. Sometimes they turn the volume down, sometimes they turn the volume up. But these are folks who tend to get overwhelmed fairly easily. They get flooded by emotion. They haven't had the experience of an attachment figure who's been able to help them when they're dysregulated or overwhelmed. Now, the good news in all of this is that these classifications are not fixed. If you are not secure, it doesn't mean that you will never be secure. There is the possibility of what we call earned security, and that's what we work on in psychotherapy. In a stable relationship with a good therapist, one can recreate that secure attachment experience and work towards earned security. So that's the good news in the psychotherapy world. So what is happening in the minds of the child and the caregiver in each of these classifications? This is what Bowlby called the internal working model, or a sort of map of relationships that we use to predict what is going to happen in a relationship. So in the case of a secure classification, these are situations in which the child has experienced their caregiver as available and nurturing, but not overwhelming, okay? So the child gets the idea that they're worthy of care, and the attachment figure actively communicates the idea that the child is in fact worthy of care. The child is able to be direct in their signaling to the attachment figure, and the attachment figure feels confident in what to do when the signals are received. They aren't insecure in their own ability to parent. They know what to do and they feel confident in it. So the child experiences that relationship as being nurturing and secure. They experience the caregiver as being available but not overwhelming. They learn also to adjust their needs, and so sometimes they can be more persistent and other times less persistent, and the parent similarly learns to adjust their responses. So this is what we call the goal-corrected partnership. It's a two-way street. So the child learns how to communicate with the parent, and the parent learns how to communicate with the child. So they establish an ongoing interpersonal dialogue that helps inform future relationships. So you can see how this would be really valuable in later relationships, to have this foundation of how to communicate and how to get one's needs met. And at the end of the day, both the parent and the infant enjoy being together. The relationship is mutually satisfying. In the avoidant attachment, or the dismissing adult, these are folks who have learned to diminish their attachment needs because the attachment figure hasn't been as consistently available. The attachment figure could be absent or rejecting for any number of different reasons. This is not meant to be a criticism of the adult. This is simply an analysis of the relationship itself. So in this situation, the child gets the idea that their emotional self is not worthy of care. And the attachment figure is confused and maybe doesn't know how to meet those needs, and tends to rely on self-help books and technical information rather than following their gut and relying on their intuition in the relationship. So the child learns that they can't get too close because they can't depend on the reaction of the attachment figure. The attachment figure sends the message that they think the child can do this on their own. They don't need a lot of care from the attachment figure. This makes the child fairly anxious, though, because children do need their attachment figures. They need help to soothe and to understand their emotions. They need the wiser, stronger attachment figure to rely on when they feel insecure. So they feel kind of put upon. They feel like they've been pushed into this independent role too soon, and they get angry about it, but they don't know what to do with that anger. And the anger makes the attachment figure uncomfortable as well, because emotions are not something that they're comfortable dealing with. So the child learns to really rely more on their peers, their affiliative system, and the attachment figure teaches them that they are better off being independent and self-reliant. In the preoccupied adults, these are the folks who've turned the volume up. So they've learned to really demand attention, and they recognize that emotions are really central to who they are, but they're not sure what to do with them. And the attachment figure doesn't know how to manage those feelings either. They get overwhelmed, and when they're overwhelmed, they can't provide the support that the child needs. So the child wants to be close, but they can't quite regulate how to get close enough. And the attachment figure sends mixed messages. Stay close, stay away. They sort of form an enmeshed relationship. They're overconnected. And at the bottom line, they're not helping the child figure out their own emotions and manage them. So the child doesn't explore, doesn't venture out into the world, and becomes overly dependent on the attachment figure. And they learn that they have to really make a lot of noise in order to get their needs met or even recognized. And then finally, in this dysregulated or unresolved category, the child gets the feeling that they're rejected because they're unworthy. So what is supposed to happen in an attachment relationship is that the attachment figure is a source of that secure base and safety and embodied safety. But if, in fact, the attachment figure is a source of terror or dysregulation, then the opposite happens. The child feels afraid and alone and uncared for. So the child is frightened. They go back and forth between turning the volume up and turning the volume down. They don't have a consistent way of managing their emotions or their distress. And the attachment figure in these situations is typically really overwhelmed. It's not that they want to reject the child, it's that they can't manage it for whatever reason. These could be situations in which the parent's own attachment history is dysregulated, or there is substance abuse or trauma that is interfering with the parent's ability to connect with their child at that very deep and basic level. So parenting is overwhelming for the parent, and they experience the parenting relationship as overwhelming and awful. So the child learns to do whatever they can to get their needs met. And sometimes what happens is that the relationship gets reversed, and the child, instead of being cared for by the attachment figure, begins to take care of the attachment figure. It's a role reversal that can be extremely confusing to the child and cause lots of problems down the road. So that's why we spend so much time with attachment. I know that's a lot of information. I invite you to schedule a consultation with one of us, and we would be happy to talk to you more about it. And this is only the first in a series of educational webinars that we plan to provide. Thank you for watching.